Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to Health Oddity, episode 30. We have made it to 30 and I've just been informed by Peter Lant that according to Pat Flynn, if you make it to 7 episodes, you're doing well. So we're now on episode 30 and we have a very, very special guest who I'll introduce you to in a minute. But before that, I'll introduce you to the usual co-host, the usual suspects. Say hello, Mr. Peter Lant.
Hello, how are you doing? You all right?
And say hello, Mr. Paul Bassett.
Hello. I'm glad to be here after kind of screaming and pulling my hair out. I mean, I did have a full head of hair before my Mac started playing up.
Okay, well, we are here.
You know, that's all that matters.
And we are joined today from Denver, Colorado, USA, I believe, by Mr. Josh Hillis. So just quickly say hello, Josh.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Hey, okay, so so Josh is well, I'm going to say he's involved in nutrition, but you'll find out very quickly when we start talking to him that he's very different. We have had people on the podcast before, dietitians, nutritionists, that sort of thing, talking about more the the nuts and bolts and the minutiae of food and the kind of, the components of a healthy diet and that sort of thing. But Josh has written, I know he's written 2 books. He may have written more than 2 books, but I know definitely 2. He wrote Fat Loss Happens on Monday with Dan John, which came out a number of years ago now, 5-6 years ago or more, Josh?
More, like 2013.
Wow. 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Okay. And he's recently, I think 2020, Lean and Strong came out, which I'm currently reading. I've just realized I'm only 20 pages from the end, so I'm nearly there with that. But Lean and Strong.
Don't give away the ending.
I won't give away the ending.
Who done it? Who was it?
It has a post-credit scene, just so you know.
Not like Dan John nearly gave away the ending to The Mandalorian when he was on. And I've only just finished watching WandaVision yesterday, so I'm up to that.
Excellent.
But yeah, Lean and Strong. On the cover it says eating skills, psychology, and workout. So what you will find while we talk to Josh, he'll tell you a lot more about himself, and we'll get into a good conversation in a minute. But his books are more about actually making this stuff work and actually finding your own way and your own path and a very, very healthy and sensible and sustainable perspective on eating and nutrition. So we'll find out more. So over to you, Josh. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and what you're doing and what you're up to?
Yeah. So I come from fitness, right? Like I've been a personal trainer since 2004. But I'm in school for psychology now and actually starting to do a little bit of research on eating behavior. And there was just sort of like this long progression where, like I got into training and I was doing like kettlebell stuff and some strength training stuff. And most of my clients wanted to lose weight. And it became pretty clear that like we had to solve some food issues. And it's just been sort of like a long process of sorting out like, how do I make a difference for more people, right? Like, like in my first book, it was kind of like more towards like, I was trying to get like habit-based food and I was trying like what might be considered like flexible dieting or something like that. And now it's progressing more towards like the psychology around eating behavior and managing like stress eating and cravings and what I'm calling like skill-based eating. And really all it comes down to is just that I wanted, like when I first started as a trainer, I was able to make a difference for this like narrow band of people in terms of weight loss. All my clients have always come to me for weight loss. So that's what I do. So in the beginning, I was able to make a difference for this like really narrow band of people. And I kept saying like, how do I expand that? How do we reach the people that like, just like dieting or just like, here's a macro plan, like didn't make a difference for? Or like it worked for a while and then it all came apart.
And what was the turning point for you where you thought, because so many people out there, the people are peddling, meal plans or diet plans or ways of eating, and your book, you kind of go through all the different kind of current modalities of eating and kind of the subsections of dieting and that sort of thing, and you talk about all of them, but then you take a much bigger, broader approach. And one of the things that we've spoke about before on here is consistency and adherence. And the one thing that I love the whole, treating eating and diet, well, not diet, treating eating as skill practice, as you would do training and that sort of thing. How did you kind of, get into that side of things?
So, just like everyone, so I started at a gym that had like a built-in like meal planning program. So I started with that, and I was like, okay, that's working for some people. Why isn't it working for others? And I was having people like log their food, like we were doing food logs, and for a long time, and you can see it in Fat Loss Happens on Monday, like I was really kind of hanging my hat on food logging. But what I realized was that when people would hand me their food log, I wasn't actually coaching their food. I was coaching like, hey, what happened here? And like, what could we do strategically about this? And so that's where it got into like the habit-based stuff. But it was just a matter of like, oh, so when you ate slower, like that made a difference. Or like, oh, when you planned ahead, like that made a difference. And so I started to look at like, okay, so there's these things that we're doing, whatever we call them. There's like these actions, and like they're influencing the food, and the food is influencing the weight, and people are tracking like the food and they're tracking the weight, but like these are lagging indicators of these actions over here. And it's just been a process of getting more and more away from like these lagging indicators, more into like, what are the things that affect it, and trying to get smarter about that. And learning like, oh, okay, so like if we, some of it's like blindingly, like just amazingly simple. Like, oh, if we have kind of balanced meal, it's a little bit easier to self-regulate our food intake, right? But other parts are a little bit different. Like, hey, like what could we put in so that you pause and like actually like check in with what's going on when you want a snack. But it was all this matter of like getting at like all these diets and all these things, all the things, like they'll work in a way because like I was saying, like if you have like a semi-balanced meal, like it's easier to regulate, but they weren't getting at the actions that actually made a difference, like planning for what you're going to eat, on that day where you have to work 10 hours and you have to pick up your kids, and then, like let's get it, like let's actually go into your real life and handle the things that are going to have all the rest work.
I like that, because how many people actually have days where they don't know what's going to happen from minute to minute? Okay, like people have like we talked about this last week. I think they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or breakfast, dinner, tea, as it is up north where I'm from. Which gets very confusing, but anyway, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which they don't necessarily need all of them. We were talking about 2 meals a day and all of that sort of stuff. So I get when people get like they'll be like, oh, I didn't have time to make anything, I just had to grab something here, and you talk about meal prep in advance and all of that stuff. But how many people do you think actually on a given day that is true? Or it's like you could plan ahead quite easily in like even the day before, do your shopping the day before for tomorrow, and then it's like then you've got your stuff, so all you need to do is eat that, and that's all you've got. Then every now and then you'll buy it the day before, the next day it'll just be something will happen, throw your day out completely, and then you'll be like, right, I'm just going to go and grab the nearest thing. But that's how often is that going to happen?
It isn't an interesting thing that you brought up, Josh, is that you're talking about skill. I mean, when we're doing deadlifts, kettlebell swings, any kind of physical movement, swimming, whatever, we're always talking about how to acquire more skill, so that with that more skill, we can lift heavier weights, we can work more intensely with less injury chance of injury. But then when we eat, we suddenly expect these skills to suddenly appear overnight and us to be a high order eater. And really, we're a novice. And I had a conversation with a lady today, and I said, at the moment you're a novice, and that's fine. But that's quite freeing, because then, if you invest in your education, you will work your way through the skill levels to intermediate to potentially expert, depending on how far you want to take it.
Yeah.
And that gives you a sense of self-efficacy and agency over the whole thing. So I'm interested to hear your kind of how you're overcoming some of these kind of challenges for clients.
Yeah. Okay. Both the things. So like Peter, what you said is like most of the obstacles that stop people most of the time, they can see them coming, right? If they just look at their week ahead of time, they can go like, oh, you know what, Thursday is going to be a disaster. Oh, you know what, like they can see it and they can actually plan. And then once in a while, there's things that come up that throw everything off, and we need like a separate plan for that also. But like, it's amazing how much of it we actually, if we just stop and look. And the funny thing is, here's the thing that's really amazing, is that if we get clients if we get people in the habit of looking at their week and going like, oh, here's the thing that's going to come up, or oh, here's the thing that's going to come up, and they start thinking about what they could do in those situations, then they actually get better at the situations that they haven't planned for, just because they aren't caught flat-footed by things not going well. They're already just kind of like in a headspace of like, oh, this isn't going to be super easy all of the time. And then the point about skill is so, oh man, okay. So I love that you brought up that like, it's okay to be a novice, because like, if we can use an example of like playing guitar, or like even learning to drive, or like if you have a kid that's like learning to play, like if we think of anything that we're learning, we always suck at first and we always get better, right? And we expect to make mistakes. We expect like that's how you learn. And like, that's the conversation that I try and have with clients like every single week, that like we learn through making mistakes and then reflecting on them. Yeah. Like that's how we do it. And then there's all these eating skills. And for the people listening, to clarify, like I look at things two different ways. There are guidelines and there are skills. And so a guideline might be something like, I'm going to plate a balanced meal. I'm going to put my fork down between bites, which is a thing that would like slow me down eating. And like with those guidelines, they're guidelines, not rules. They're like training wheels to learn a skill, right? You'd put a skill like, I'm going to check in with my stomach and see if I'm full. Right. And so like the skills really are about checking in with yourself, checking in with the situation going around, and checking in with your personal values. But we also use these guidelines as like a structure. And so sometimes in this conversation when you're talking about guidelines, and sometimes when you're talking about skills.
I can't tell you how hard it was for me to put my fork down when I'm eating. It's like because I'm used to having, your knife and fork, and you eat and you're talking, and just the action of, I tried to do it. I had my wife and my daughter, and you put it down. It just feels so strange, because you're like, what do I do with my hands? What's going on?
You can tell that James is an Italian, because he'd know exactly what to do with his hands.
Honestly, if you haven't tried it, and this, I think it might just be me, but
it's not just you.
It's so strange. If you're eating and you say each bite you're going to have it, and you're going to put your knife and fork down and sit, it's so strange. It just feels alien, because I've never done it, So it's like I'm a novice.
Did you have competition with siblings about the food on the table as a child? Because I grew up and there was competition for food. So my wife is a faster eater than me. So, we know we've got to get the food in before someone else takes it.
Yeah. But it might not even, but it's not necessarily that I'm eating fast. It's just that I'm used to holding them in between, even if you're talking, I'm used to holding them, And
well, because you point them at people, don't you, when you're talking to
them? One of the first things, Josh.
One thing I just want to throw out there about that, for people listening at home, putting your fork down with bites is just a way to slow down.
Yeah.
It's not the only way. It doesn't have to be between every bites. It doesn't have to be between every bite, but it is a way to slow down so you can check in.
Okay. And you mentioned, what was I going to say there? Because you mentioned, one of the first things in the book, it might even be the first thing, the first level is don't diet or stop diet, don't diet. I think that we were talking just before we pressed record about someone, people I've spoke to who I've recommended the book to, started reading it, who've been in a diet cycle, and I think you call it like a diet cycle of failure or something along those lines. But like they've been in this diet cycle for the last 30 years, and they're trying to take some of the guidelines and some of the skills, and she's saying how hard she's finding it not to turn them into rules. Because they want that that tell me what to do and I'll do it. And it's so, I mean, that's a challenge for so many people, isn't it? I think because we've been conditioned for decades on this stuff.
Absolutely. Oh man, it's that is the biggest pitfall, is to try and turn these things into rules. And like you said, we have been conditioned for decades. There is an element of like, it feels kind of secure if something is a rule, right? It seems really simple, and simple feels like it would be better. Unfortunately, simple like diet rules are simple to the point where they're like fragile, right? Like they break in so many different situations, stress or schedule or like anything throws it off, you're done for. So the trick for people that are trying to move from diets to any kind of like skill-based approach or habit-based approach or anything with a little bit more flexibility is to just notice to just notice their thoughts. They don't need to change them. They don't need to make them go away, because they're not going away, right? They're like, if you've been dieting for 30 years, you're not gonna like stop having thoughts about like moralizing food and dieting, diet rules and perfectionism and things like that next week. Like that's not happening. But you can notice, and as soon as you notice, then like you notice those perfectionist thoughts, you can go like, oh, that's a perfectionist thought, or oh, that's a diet thought, or oh, that's a rigid rule. And you can be with it without acting on it, without dwelling on it, without like, you can just let it, and they'll come and go in their own time. Don't need to fix them, don't need to change them. But if we notice them and separate ourselves from them, then we've got power to take different actions from what we've done before.
So that's sorry, Pete, go on.
I was going to say that's a bit like meditation, just going off on a tangent a little bit, but it's a bit like meditation, because people think meditation is just like switching off all your thoughts and being with yourself, and you can't do that. And it's just not attaching emotion to that thought. So it's a form of meditation, I suppose, isn't it? Like basically you have that thought of, this isn't working, I want to go on a diet, or I want to eat that, or whatever, but you just detach yourself from the thought and just let it sit and don't attach emotion to it. And then you're like, okay, that's cool. I don't have to do anything about it.
You nailed it. You totally nailed it. And that's a great point, because people that have done meditation can actually transition into this. And it's a little different, right? Because it's not like, oh, I'm going to notice my thought and come back to my breath, or notice my thought or come back to, it's more like I'm going to notice that thought and then I'm going to come back to my skill practice, or I notice that thought, or maybe I'm just going to go back to work, or maybe I'm just going to like notice that thought and go back to hanging out with my kids. And a lot of people actually do say that they can't believe how much more like people that have dieted like all of their lives and started when they were kids, when they start doing that, they can't believe how much more present they are with people. That like how often they were getting pulled, like if they were having dinner with friends or family or whatever, how much of the time they were getting like pulled away by these like diet thoughts, versus when they could actually like notice and like come back to conversation.
Well, that was something we had with Maggie last week, wasn't it? Like Maggie was, she used to use Weight Watchers. She was one of the team leaders for her group, and she would see the world in terms of the reds and the green foods, and she would look at plates, and it would be a consuming kind of element to the way she analyzed her food intake, which which meant the social situations were intruded upon and things like that. So it's very difficult. It's like a learned behavior, and it's very difficult to snap out of that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
What sort of difference is it? Because I'm just thinking back to the guitar analogy, like learning to play the guitar.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're learning to play the guitar, you know if you're rubbish or not, right? You can hear it. You do though, don't you? I mean, you hear differently in your own head sometimes. You're like, oh, that sounds like Eric Clapton, I do, and everyone else is sitting like,
yeah, you haven't seen as many bands as I have.
Well, you know if it's good or not, right? And you know,
like a deadlift.
You can kind of tell if you're making progress. So what's the difference there for people? Because it's a struggle with eating. This is why I always find it very fascinating that food is just like food, nutrition, all of that is like it's on a different level to everything else. Because you can't see the progress like now. You can't, like on a guitar, you can't think, oh, I nailed that. You can't actually see it until a week down the line, 2 weeks down the line, like a month down the line. If you've got if you're morbidly obese, you can't see it for a year or so, possibly. So how do you get people to kind of realize that?
So the first thing is that we still track. I don't track food anymore because what I actually want to change is behavior, but we track behavior. And so if we're working on a skill, then there's depending on how many meals a day you eat, like let's say 3, that would be like 21 opportunities to practice in a week, right? Or if you're working on a between meal skill, right? Like if you're working on pausing 10 minutes before snacking, then you also have 21 times to practice because you've got like breakfast to lunch, lunch to dinner, dinner to sleep, right? And so we track, and so we set goals, and we might start off with okay, we're going to take these 2 guidelines and this one skill, and we're going to practice each of them 10 times this week, or you might say oh, you know what? The guidelines are a little bit more concrete. They're a little easier to get my head around. I'm going to practice those 14 times this week. And I'm going to practice that skill of noticing when I'm full 7 times this week. And so you're looking at that and you're like, okay, I hit the goal or I didn't, right? But let's say I do, then maybe next week we're like, okay, what do we do? Do we add another skill? Do we bump up the frequency? Do we, but we could actually see really clear progress. Oh, wow. When I started, I never, actually checked in before having a snack or not. I never checked in with myself. And now I'm doing that 14 times a week. Now I'm doing that most of the time. That's a big difference, and that will show up on the scale and it'll show up in, but I mean, right now this week, you can see it. You can be like,
yeah,
that's better.
I think the one that I've used again myself, obviously reading the book, it's not like I haven't sort of said, well, I'm going to start following this now, but you do just by reading the book, you get so much more of an awareness of yourself, and if I feel like having a snack or something, it says about, take some time and think, are you actually hungry for just a specific thing, like a craving for something sweet, or are you hungry for a balanced meal, and then just give a bit of time and sit with, like you say, and I think you call it, is it diffusing, where you sort of separate the thought with the action?
Yeah.
Well, I'm hungry for this sweet thing, but you like Pete said with the meditation, you separate that. It just because I've got a sweet craving, I've got to eat something sweet. You can separate those 2 things, and you give yourself a bit of time to sit with it, and it's fascinating. It really is. It's a totally different way of doing things, and I think that's why people probably do find it quite tough, because it's so different. But it's a way that you can. I suppose you're trying to set people up for the rest of their lives, aren't you? For something that they can do for the rest of their lives rather than the next 3 months, so.
This is something that people probably want to practice for 6 months or a year, right? Like you talk about diffusion. Diffusion's a pretty high level cognitive skill. it's like the black belt skill of the whole program. To explain it to people, it comes from contextual behavioral science. It is the skill of like noticing your thoughts and separating your actions, right? It's distinct from having to like change it or fix it or whatever. It's just saying like, oh, I'm going to notice that, and I'm going to take this other action that fits my values, my goals. And what you were talking about right there is using it with a craving, where you're like, oh, I'm having this craving. Like let's say you actually check in, just like you said. You're like, oh, I checked in, and really all I want is this cookie. I'm not really feeling like it, you know. Like, okay, so that's probably a craving. But like getting that separation where you're like, oh, I want a cookie. Of course I do, because cookies are delicious, right? Like, and so like it doesn't feel like this, oh, and it's gonna come and go. Like it's not gonna last forever, which is another thing that like if someone has like a really strong habit of like wanting a thing then immediately eating it, then they kind of feel like the craving is gonna build forever. They don't know that like, oh, if I wait like 10 minutes, it usually goes away. But yeah, so for the people listening at home, there's like, if you meditate, you can take any of the metaphors from meditation that you've ever used and port that over into diffusion. Now I'm starting to call it unhooking because it's a little easier. You can port that over into unhooking for food cravings. And a super easy way, the absolute like clearest way to do it is actually to just get out a piece of paper and just write like what's going on for 60 seconds. Because that same kind of separation that you get in meditation, or that same kind of separation that you get with like a metaphor, kind of happens automatically when you write something down. All of a sudden you can see it and it doesn't feel like personal and urgent or like a command, and you can be like, oh, you know what? I don't feel a hollow feeling in my stomach. I feel tired. I'm frustrated that my boss just yelled at me and I've got a project that's due. I'm probably not hungry. Do I want to have a cookie? Not this time. You know, like it can be that, and it's so easy on paper. Or the flip side, just so everyone knows, like this is all like very flexible. You could be like, you know what? I haven't had a cookie in like a week, and like this cookie is delicious, and it's like a chocolate chip cookie, and it's homemade, and I love it. I'm gonna have it. Like you can actually make that choice. That choice is totally allowed. The whole thing is just that you have a choice, that it's not automatic.
So what happens, and this is I did a little survey actually, well, I say so, it was a very casual survey with my clients about what are the big challenges they find with their current diets or nutritional approaches. And what came up was firstly boredom eating, then stress eating, and then typically emotional eating, where I mean, I see them as a staggered in terms of their kind of their kind of all-encompassing kind of feeling. Certainly with the emotional eating, which is obviously sometimes historic kind of behaviors that have been embedded since childhood or whatever. Those are the kind of situations in which it is very difficult to pull yourself apart from the very intense emotions that food may have for you. So I'm totally on board with the fact that is a black belt skill, because you kind of need to put a bit of work in before you can really truly separate yourself from those things. So what are you doing for people who have these, firstly boredom eating, which is I think probably easier to solve, but then the stress eating and then the emotional eating? How do you apply those principles?
So for like there's stuff that you can do during a meal that will help with it, but like specifically between meals, the first thing that we have to do is we have to put in a gap between the stimulus and the response, right? I like to have people pause 10 minutes. So like I have a craving, I'm going to pause 10 minutes. That gives me time to check in, and then I can go through the other stuff. Then the next thing that we add in is a skill of like checking in with myself, which is going to be like, do I feel a hollow feeling in my stomach, or is this something else, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, I never thought about like, do I feel a hollow feeling in my stomach? But that's like the clearest like physical indicator of hunger. The next would be like was brought up earlier. Am I hungry for like the specific thing, or is it a balanced meal? And then the last is, if I pause, does it increase or does it fade? hunger will usually continue to build if you wait, 10, 20, 30 minutes, right? Cravings often fade within 20, especially if you like go back to work or go back to hanging out with people or whatever, like you forget. So there's that second piece of like checking with yourself and seeing what's going on. Then you can get a little bit higher level and check in with the situation. And you can go like, what's going on right now? Okay. Clearly I am stressed. Like clearly, like there's this work thing that I just don't want to do. Once you know that, you can deal with it. And then you've always got two paths. You've got three. You've got, do I put in self-care instead of food? Do I put in unhooking instead of food? Or do I put in self-care and unhooking? So one thing I've noticed a lot of times is a lot of my clients eat at work because they never give themselves breaks. Literally the only time they give themselves a break is when they eat a snack. And so a lot of times they just need a walk around. I used to be a walk around the office, but now pandemic times, walk around their house or whatever,
I had a client say that's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
What she's trying to do now is watch YouTube videos instead of eating, because she's just sat Zoom meeting, and she's told me she's got addicted to tarot card readings on YouTube. But, I mean,
that's awesome.
So it can be a slippery slope the other way. Yeah.
I mean, looking at work because she's going to be a millionaire. It's just cards of told her. It's fantastic.
Because this sort of sounds a little bit, the way you said that, Josh, sounds a little bit like, I don't know if it still goes on really, because I don't really work in an office or anything like that, but when people used to go out for cigarette breaks, half an hour every hour.
Yeah.
It's just the action of this, that's the only
stopping.
They just get out and they stand outside, they have a chat for 5 minutes, they have a cigarette, they go back in. So is that kind of similar to the snacking in that way?
Yeah, I mean, a lot, like the thing is we actually, I mean, depending on the kind of work you do, like we aren't optimal, like we don't perform optimally, like going straight on forever, right? Like most of us don't. I use rescue time, which is a thing that like actually like tracks my productivity. And I'm actually significantly more productive if I take some breaks. Like I just am. I think everyone is. And so, yeah, like, and it's one of those things where like, that's kind of helpful to know, like for clients that are super type A or have super stressful jobs, most of them have found out when they've actually tried it, that if they actually just like take deliberate breaks from time to time, they're actually more productive in actuality.
I think that's a great, I really, two things. I really like the idea of just taking a break, but I also like that idea of that 10-minute gap between the stimulus and then making a decision. We've all had it when we've got an email in from something and our blood's boiling or whatever, someone's texted us and we want to just respond straight away. And my wife's the first person to always tell me, said, Paul, you need to cool down. You need to just respond to it in half an hour or something like that. When you've had a bit of time to process it,
Totally.
Otherwise you just make a bad decision, don't you?
Heat of the moment. Don't do it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And one of the things, Josh, we haven't talked about, which is a massive part of the book, which I mean, I've always loved doing work on values and things with people, but the whole values sort of section, and then the way you talk about, your values are the person you want to become and the person you want to show up as, and the people you respect have these values, and then tying that to your kind of food practice and your diet practice and your workout practice and that sort of thing. I mean, that's something I've never really seen. Well, I've never seen in a diet book before. You know what I mean? It's just something, and it's a huge part of it, isn't it? So can you talk a little bit about that maybe for the listeners?
Yeah. So for people to get a sense of the way that we're talking about values, which is sort of like a very like motivation science kind of way of talking about values, or contextual behavioral science way of talking about values, what we're talking about is really kind of like character strengths. It's kind of like a specific way of being. It's not like moral. It's not like it's not a goal. It's something like I value, and like you could have different valued areas of life, like, oh, I value the area of family, or I value career, I value learning, but what we're talking about is actually like a character strength. Like I value conscientiousness or connectedness or self-compassion. It's like a way of being, right? And so if a client chooses like adventure, conscientiousness, and self-compassion, right? They've got adventure, conscientiousness, and self-compassion. They're actually going to start practicing drawing on those for their like weekly planning. And at the highest level, they're actually going to use those in the moment to make decisions. So what the thing that opens up is a lot of flexibility and a lot of like noticing how one situation is different from another, right? Like maybe when it's a random Thursday, I want to emphasize conscientiousness. And maybe when I'm on vacation, I want to emphasize adventure. Or maybe I'm out at dinner, maybe in post-pandemic times, I'm out at dinner at this really cool restaurant, and it's like a different cuisine than I've ever had before. And like adventure really matters to me. So I'm going to order more than I normally would because I want to try more things. And, you know, like you can actually make those kinds of decisions, you know, or you could say, you know what, like I went out to eat like 7 times last week, and that seems like way more than normal, but I had these things, and you know what, this week I'm going to be more conscientious, and that's going to look like I'm going to practice these skills more often. And all those kinds of things open up. It's a lot healthier. Oh, and also besides it being like better for your well-being, when you really get into it, it's a more robust form of motivation, right? People get derailed if like an external goal isn't going the way that they want to. If they don't hit their milestone that they wanted to hit on their scale weight, they get like way derailed. But like we don't change the kind of person we want to be when we have a bad day. You know,
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Yeah, we don't fundamentally make that. Well, why? You know, it seems crazy when you articulate it like that. You know.
And I think you mentioned motivation there as well, and that's one of the other things that I really, again, I've not seen in any other books like this before, where you really talk about, you know, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and then and what really hit home for me was there's a section in there where you almost for the coach as it were, where you sort of say trying to motivate people this way is actually quite destructive, you know, and dangerous, but motivating people, allowing people to be motivated this way is actually really healthy and you know, I'm going to be more successful. So I mean, this is something that we've not had anyone on the podcast talking about these things in these terms before. So yeah, can you just kind of, because I mean, it really was, I mean, for me, it was just like, wow, you know, all the stuff that I've been doing this for 20 odd years, and all the stuff you're taught and the way you've done things in the past, you just think, wow, that's really, you know, not good. In the nicest, you know,
Is there going to be some lawsuits, James?
I think James has thought his entire career there. He's given up. It's going to be me and Paul next week.
We're watching a man.
We'll miss you.
Eyes.
He's going to go and get a desk job.
No, but it was really like, wow, you know, it's like, but it's so totally against the grain what you write. So can you?
Yeah. I had the same experience. Experience.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to study psychology and realize like, whoa, this is not what I. So for the people at home, like there's a theory called self-determination theory, and it's extraordinarily robustly researched. And the simplified version is there's 4 levels of motivation. There's 6, but we'll talk about 4 that we can influence. That's important. So the first one is reward and punishment, right? Carrot and stick, right? That's something everyone's heard. It is a form of motivation. It just doesn't last very long. Like if you're motivating someone with a carrot or a stick, as soon as you remove the carrot or the stick, they're no longer motivated, right? It has to be like, The next is actually where we pull from most often in fitness, which is guilt and contingent self-esteem. Again, it's a form of motivation. It's actually a little bit more internal than reward and punishment, but it isn't awesome. It isn't super long lasting. It isn't great for our well-being to use guilt and contingent self-esteem as our only form of motivation. Then we get into values. Here's a value that I'm going to apply to this area of my life, and it's the kind of person that I want to be, and that's where I'm going to pull from. And that's where we start to get on the side that's more robust and much better for our well-being, right? And then the fourth level is actually going to be values that are fully integrated with our entire sense of self, right? So like we can be motivated by a value in one area, and then there's also like, oh, this value actually, like I can clearly see how it applies to all these different areas of my life, and I'm it's not necessarily even like your values conflicted before, but more like I get how this is bigger than just food, right? So those are the four levels, and if you're aware of them, you can go like, okay, oh, it's normal and human to pull from all of them at some times, right? You're not gonna like never have guilt or contingent self-esteem. I mean, like we're human, but if you can pull from values more, things go a lot better.
So if
I've got a couple of things written
Yes,
down. Sorry, I've got a couple of things written down here from what you were saying. Because like the whole thing about like using the cookie example, well, no, not using the cookie example, using the example you said about having the values of conscientiousness, which I'm glad you picked. Thank you for that. So I have to keep saying that. Adventure and the other one I can't remember. But when because like if you have a craving for something or whatever, it like you were talking about, if you write it down on paper, which you're not always going to do.
No.
Like the way I think about it is, you get it out of your head, and then when it's on paper, you can't rationalize that on paper.
Yeah.
If it's in there, you can rationalize it. Stick it over here and go, oh, well, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to eat it anyway. Which is why the 10-minute thing's really good, because you can't rationalize it for that long until you go, actually, this is a little, I'm lying to myself. This is rubbish. At least if you write it down, you're looking at the thing going, I can't justify that.
Yeah.
Or if you can justify it, you have the thing anyway, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
But that's why I like the values. That's why I like the values thing, because then at least if you've done something, so like you said, you go to a restaurant or whatever, it's a new cuisine, you've never had it, and you're going to eat loads. And then someone go, why did you do that? Because you're trying to lose weight, and you can explain exactly why you did it and what you're going to do about it. That sticks to your values, and you can. So it's not rationalizing it; it's explaining exactly what you've done. And you're like, and here's my plan. Either I knew I was coming here, so I was going to do this, or tomorrow and the next day or whatever, I'm gonna be good. Which we've spoken about that before. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but we always think like, oh, tomorrow I'll be good, so it's fine. And that's like, no, hang on. that's a future you who's a poor soul.
What if it's all good, right? Like I had a client that that making pizza with her son changed everything. That they actually took a pizza making class, and like this like weekly pizza making class was this wonderful thing for them to do. And like before, she would have thought like, oh, pizza's not on my diet or whatever. But here she was like, oh, like my connection to my family really, really matters. And like having this pizza night makes all the difference. And she got really, really like it was the best choice for her. And the thing is, she got to where she was like, oh, you know what? Like we can go and make a pizza, and on pizza night, I have 2 slices of pizza and I stop. And she's like, I can actually do that anytime I want. Like she had like 2 slices of pizza and a salad, and it's fine. And so like we start to see like, oh, like you know, good or bad, or it's just like, is this workable with my values? And like that was workable with our values. And like having a glass of wine on date night, you know, is workable with a person's values. Or like, you know, like, and that's different from like the end of the day, like they had a rough day and they're like, oh, I'm gonna kill 3 beers because I had a stressful day and I want to chill out, and I don't know how to chill out without it. And like being able to make those kinds of choices, You know, it's so cool. It's so cool. And like, this comes all the way back to the beginning where we're talking about like why diet rules are like appealing. Cause it isn't messy. Like, and what we're talking about is a little bit messy, and people have to play a lot. They have to go like, oh, you know what? Like those 2 slices of pizza I had, like that actually was like really does fit the kind of person I want to be for the rest of my life. Or like, oh, you know what? That when my coworker brought in donuts, I had that donut, it wasn't really that good. And you know what, like that wasn't it. And so like they have to figure out like, when do I want to make these choices? And it's entirely individual. It's totally like no one can give you a rule book, right? And so that's what's fun, and that's what makes it exciting, and that's what actually takes a lot of reflection.
So what do you do with clients who say, for example, get success in the short term, and they kind of hit a short-term goal and it feels great? You know, they've lost 6 kilos, they've dropped a dress size, or they feel better. They put a lot of effort in for 2 months, 1 month, 3 months. And then they just coast. But, you know, they stay with you, but they don't quite, you know, they're in this kind of limbo where there isn't some kind of driving need to radically change. Because most people get in touch with me, and maybe they do with you, because there's something very pressing. You know, they apply for a program, and they're like, I've got to do this now, I've got to do it now. And they kind of achieve a bit, and they achieve enough to see change, but not really ever get them to exactly where they wanted to go when we first spoke.
Oh, man.
What happens there?
So many now. So many good things. So here's the thing that's great is that like I'm trying to coach them to eat in a way that matches their values, and they get to say what that is. And I've had clients that got, you know, halfway to the goal that they signed up for, and they're like, you know what, like I'm eating the way that I want to eat, and I'm connecting with people the way I want to connect, and I've never felt better in my body, and I've never felt better about myself. And you know what, I'm just going to work on like deadlifts and pull-ups, you know, or like whatever, like they get to choose. They actually, for the first time in their lives, they have autonomy about their goal. And some of them will say, you know what, I really do want to lose another 6 kilos. What changes do I have to make now? And then we do that, right? And some of them will be like, you know what? I thought I wanted to lose 12 kilos. I lost 8 and I'm cool. Great. You know, I don't care. I don't,
one of the things, Josh, that again, I don't know which one of the 4 sort of strands of motivation it would fit into, but you talk about status, you know, like, or societal expectations, you know, where I think probably a lot of people, when they start exercising or they start training, and I'm sure that all of us have had it before and get it fairly regularly, where people come to you and say, certainly in the UK anyway, oh, the doctor has said that I need to weigh this much because then my BMI is, I'm in my healthy BMI. So we've got a guy that I know who's currently 17 stone, and he's got this thing, and he said, right, the doctor said I need to be 12 stone 3, you know. Which is what?
That's precise as well, isn't it?
Like 100, yeah, like say that, I don't know, is it 185 pounds or something like that in American? Yeah. So they kind of but that's, it's not really their goal. For some reason they've got this in their head that the doctor said I need to weigh this much, or you know, the latest issue of Men's Health has said, you know, men should ideally be under 15% body fat or whatever. So where does that fit in the kind of the motivation, that kind of societal pressures and things, which kind of ties to goals and stuff, I think?
So that's clearly on the external side, right? That's clearly like guilt and contingent self-esteem. What it actually is it's contingent self-esteem, right? I'll feel good about myself when I hit this goal. And I've had a lot of clients that were like sure they needed to lose 60 pounds and they lost 40, and they were like, oh, you know what, like I'm actually good. Or they were sure they needed to lose 30, and they, you know, like because they spent so much time working on their values that they actually got clear that like, oh, this number that I had in my head was given to me by someone else. And you know what? I'm not emotionally eating anymore. And you know what? I'm wearing clothes I want to wear. And like, I actually have a life that I want to live. And I know that there's more changes that I could make, but I don't know what it's for anymore.
Do you set your clients up to think like that from day one? Or do you just say, I want to hear your goals. I just want to hear where you're at, what you want to aim for. And then you just say, let's go for it. And then, but you know that the journey you'll take them on will get them to question certain things and explore certain areas of their life and values, etc. And then you know that they're probably at some point they'll have that reflection. Or do you introduce it right at the beginning and say, well, actually, I wouldn't be surprised if you start reflecting differently on your goals in the next 8 weeks or something?
That's a great question. I actually usually do. So we start talking about values pretty early, sometimes session 1, sometimes not, depends on where everyone comes in kind of different places. But like we start talking about values pretty early, and we start talking about like diet rules and societal standards of beauty really early. And wherever they come to on that, that usually takes a while for them to get there. And I am okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. And I will keep working on their goals for as long as they want, And if they want to go all the way there, cool. And if they come to a different realization so along the way, cool. But yeah, to answer your question, like I'm introducing the idea of societal standards of beauty pretty early, but I'm not necessarily saying like, hey, you're going to change your goals, because that's I'd be afraid of that feeling kind of invalidating, and I'd also be concerned that they might start to feel like, oh, are we going to be able to get like does this not work? Or because we can get, it's not an issue of getting there. Like we can get there if they want to make enough changes, and we're going to see how many changes they want to make before they,
Well, it's like Tracy Rifkin, didn't she say? I lost 100 pounds in 6 months. I just did it. I wanted to. People told me I was doing it too quickly, and I just wanted to do it that way. And she did it. No one stopped her. But someone else may want to do it a bit slower. They may want to come a different route.
They can do whatever they want. I work for them.
The funny thing with this is, right, what this might go with what James was saying earlier about what you learn in the beginning. But when someone comes in and says, I want to lose this much weight, it's like, why? Well, because I look better. Why? Why is that good? Why? Like, ask why 5 times and all that, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there, right? But what are your values is you answer that question as well, don't you? But you answer it in a more, you answer it in a way that they eventually might come to, well, the reason why, if I get to that weight, isn't actually a reason. It isn't actually that weight that is the thing. The reason why I want to do this is just because I'm ready, because it's been going on so long or whatever, or because I want to be this person. It's like, is that person that weight? And it's like, well, I don't know, do I? Like, that person is me. So it's that's what I like about this. I think it just draws out the why without actually being the annoying git sitting there going, why? Go on, tell us why. I demand to know why. But that's what it gets like, doesn't it? You only ask that so many bloody times in consultation. Why? You sit there, you can sit there as well. Just like this, why? Why? Why do you want to do that then? Get your phone out. Why? Just tell us why, because it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Do you make many sales, Peter?
Sorry?
Do you make many sales?
I've just been thinking about this actually, in the way you guys are all talking. Because I train my guys in groups, and I don't really do any marketing that much anymore. I just do like live videos and stuff like that. So the people who I get coming through, the societal norms and all that, they're already like not that bothered about anyway. And the kind of, if they slot into the group of us really well, we talk about it all anyway, and everyone kind of has got to that place in their life because they're all guys in their 40s and 50s and stuff, and they're just like, do you know what? I don't really care. I just want to be. They've got their values and all that, and we all share similar values as well.
Well, but you marketed yourself in another way. You've kind of created community, which kind of which then does the talking for you.
Exactly, and that's exactly. I'm talking to Pom tomorrow actually, because I haven't seen him for a while because he's he's been off grid for a little bit. But I'm talking to him tomorrow, and he's a guy who's helping me out with all my branding and stuff. And we're doing exactly that, Josh. We're going into values, which is quite funny because that seems to be the buzzword at the minute, doesn't it? Values is the thing at the minute, but then it always has been.
I think it's just the circles that we're moving in. Do you know what I mean? It's like
definitely.
We've said this before, that there's this kind of assumed knowledge, isn't there? That when so every week we've been doing this podcast for the last 30 weeks and talking to, kind of knowledgeable and exciting and passionate people, but they're all, we're kind of in the. I was on the radio the other day. I was on this local radio talking about things. And
I wondered when you were going to say
that. Exactly.
No, because the reason.
By the way, I'm a big radio star.
I'm not Alan Partridge. But
needless to say, he got the last laugh.
Yeah. But the reason I'm saying it is because the lady, the presenter on there, sort of said, "Oh well, I think after this pandemic, everyone's just going to stay." She didn't say it in these words. Pretty much was saying, I think after the pandemic, everyone's just going to stay at home, aren't they? They don't need gyms. They don't need people like you. She didn't say it like that, but there was a kind of thing that she was saying. And then and I said, well, the thing is, there's only ever been about, 13 to 15% of people of the population of England who've ever gone to gyms or health clubs. And she goes, "You're joking, aren't you?" She goes, "I thought everyone did. I thought when I go down the gym, it seems like everyone's there." And is that kind of assumed that everyone's kind of into the same stuff because you're into it? And we spoke about it on here before. I think, Paul, you've spoke about, you just get on social media, you just constantly see things that you like to see. So you just reinforce your own opinions about things. And because we're constantly talking about higher level stuff and values and things, it seems that that's everywhere at the moment, but I'm pretty sure it's not.
Yeah, if you go in like I try and spend some time in like general fitness groups, and man, is it different from the circles we run in.
Yep. How long do you spend in the gym? Oof, stinks in there.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's a good reality check. Like it really is, because it like reminds me, like, oh, this is where people are really coming from, and these are the questions that people really have. Like, this is what's top of mind, and it's none of the stuff that we're talking about on this podcast.
But even in coaching forums that I've been part of, sometimes people's race to provide an answer without really actually thinking about the question or delving any deeper it's quite staggering. And we do have an industry where there's such a width and breadth of knowledge, but also at the same time, I don't want any regulation because it's not that kind of industry, but there isn't really a standard, and it's very difficult to know what the quality of thought you're coming across, particularly as a consumer, because they are consumers. They're making a decision to go with either us or someone else, whether it's Weight Watchers or an online business or a more established brand or whatever it is. They are, what makes one train of thought quality and is going to deliver the result that they want in a safe manner versus someone who's just kind of woo-woo and coming up with random things,
Yeah.
I think it goes to values again, doesn't it? Like people will resonate and be drawn to people with similar values to them. So that's why the guys go to Peter. That's why the guys go to you. That's why the guys go to Josh. That's why you get, you go to people who I suppose you get a good feeling about, and you read people research, and they get drawn towards certain people, I suppose.
Well, I'll tell you what I've noticed on Facebook actually, and I saw you pop up on some adverts, Josh, for GMB.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I love their stuff. It's great. I mean, many years ago, I did their Elements program. I did one and Parallettes one.
Yeah. And, I love Parallettes one.
Yeah, and I think I did another one, the Flexibility one.
The new one's better.
Is it?
Mobility is somewhat. It's yeah.
Good. Yeah. No, I mean, because they're quality. I mean, I actually recommend people who don't have the budget to train with maybe a one-to-one trainer. I do recommend they go and check out the GMB stuff, because I know there's not just the the information that's digital and on demand, but there's also a back end kind of forum that was really kind of vibrant as well. So what's happening with you on that?
Oh, so I created GMB Eating Skills. It's a program. It's a 20-week program that kind of like walks you through guidelines and eating skills and obstacle planning and lots of values reflections. In a way, it's more streamlined and less. It's a lot less dense than my book. And one of the really cool things we did was, instead of giving like, here's a skill and give you all the information on that skill, we did it the way that I actually coach, which is like, the first time I talk to someone, we talk about the skill a little bit, and then we get them practicing, and then we reintroduce it again in a couple weeks, and we talk about it a little deeper, and then they go practice, and we talk about it a little deeper, and so from a skill learning perspective, it's a really fun way to deliver the material. And we've got a coaching group, and that's kind of fun because I get to see like a lot of people doing this. And what's amazing, what's really, really, really amazing is the like they all keep their logs, and they have like their reflections at the end of every week, right? Their reflections on how their obstacle planning went and what they did, their reflections on their values. And there's a really clear correlation between like how much people like do that reflection and how much they get out of the program. Like for the people that actually do reflect on like, how did my eating skill practice reflect or not reflect my values this week, completely changes everything for them. And so that's another thing for the folks that are listening. If you can set aside some time at the end of every week to look at like, how did my values actually show up in my eating skills practice, it is game changing. And like, on some level, that's kind of like silly obvious, like, oh, of course, if I spent 5 minutes a week, like actually looking at like, what did I do and did that reflect my values, of course that would make a difference. But it takes actually like doing it.
But that's so easy to do as well, because did it? Yes or no? It did. It didn't. What we're going to do? Like, it doesn't take any time at all, does it? You can't really talk around that. You just go, yeah or no. It's as simple as that. I love it.
I know your guys, Pete. You get them they do end of week reviews, don't they?
I was just thinking that it's pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
The guys I train in person, like I say, are mainly kind of in the whole ethos of all of this anyway. So they and they just do what they do.
Yeah.
Called the 5 Whys.
Yeah. I just ask them why once a day, on a Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and then I give them Saturday and Sunday off. No,
that's the coaching program.
For my online guys, I get them to write down 3 wins a day, and then they've got 21 each week. I'm thinking I might change it actually to values, but yeah, it's all from similar sort of stuff, just writing stuff down, taking 10 minutes at the end of the week to reflect on your week. And then I say, what was your win? Why was it a win? It's not just like, right, I had a win. It's like, well, that's great. What are you going to do about it? So it's like, why it was a win and how are you going to carry that forward into the rest of your life, basically, but into next week. And then what's the one thing, just the one thing you need to do next week to help this progress go ahead, because that's the other people then sit there, don't they, and go, right, so this week I'm going to do the putting my fork down thing, and I'm going to reflect on my values, and I'm going to I'm going to use those values when I'm in restaurants or whatever, after COVID, and like all the other stuff you mentioned, I'm going to, like we said, I'm going to do all of that this week. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not.
Yeah.
You think you are, but you're not, because you've got a job and kids and all of that. So what's the one thing that you need to do out of all that? And then they'll go, well, the main thing at the minute is this is what I need to focus on. And sometimes what I tend to find is someone will say, oh, the one thing I need to focus on is my fitness or something. And it'll be like, no, it isn't. You're now what you're doing is avoiding the very thing that you need to focus on. So do that. And then they'll say exactly what it is. And I'm going, yeah, that one. So do that. It's amazing what the difference it has, because it keeps people on track without permanently thinking about it. They've just got to think about that one thing that in everything they do that week. And does it? It kind of is a sort of values thing without me realizing I was doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're very values oriented. You're very autonomy supportive. Like you're asking questions, it's all coming from them. You're like facilitating them creating their own program. Like that's amazing. That's amazing, amazing. And I love that you bring up that like
They don't really need me, but they just need to ask themselves these questions.
it's
They'll be
useful.
listening. Okay.
It's useful to have someone.
Thank you.
You saved his business.
Well, no, I mean like, no, but I mean like when I got really good at coaching, I started to feel like I was cheating. I was like, it's all coming from them.
Yeah.
They can figure out all their stuff. Like it turns out they actually know their lives better than I do.
That's the big secret that the fitness industry wants to keep under wraps. That's what I'm going to put on the adverts. The secret that fitness professionals aren't telling you.
Yeah. What you've got to do that advert as well, you've got to have a bit of paper with "Change My Mind" written on it.
Oh, right, yeah.
That works apparently.
Oh, so like you bring up like not having too many things. I would say like not having too many things and also not having too hard of things, right? Like we've talked about like learning guitar, we've talked about like deadlifting, we've talked about like, you know, first time you play guitar, you're not playing Van Halen. First time you deadlift, you're not deadlifting 325. Everything's progressive. And it's amazing how much you can like how much complexity you actually can have in if you layer it very slowly. And so it's one of those things where like we talk about like making decisions in the moment based on your values. We start with plating balanced meals. we start with what would it look like to have 4 to 6 hours between meals without snacking, and then we just see what comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is if you took a poll of each of us as individuals, and we would be, you know, people hold us up as as hopefully living the life that we try and coach people, you know, we try and live a healthy life. We actually probably only ever utilize a handful of skills on a daily basis to succeed. We don't kind of sit there doing all these higher order stuff. We're probably just buying our food in advance, roughly know what we're going to cook, base our meals around a bit of protein, eat vegetables, don't overeat the calories, whatever it is, you know, and we just do that probably more consistently than people who don't, you know.
Yeah.
But that comes from, I think, like it's like what Josh is doing. He's just pulling from, well, he's obviously studying psychology, which is a big thing of it, really. Let's face it. But it's kind of pulling from all those other all these other areas, isn't it? Because like it's just reminded me of so that's habit stacking, isn't it? Which you've just been talking about, which James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. And you start out with one, and then if you can do that one, you slot another one in there, and then you've got this stack of habits of like, well, just after I've done that, I'll do this, and then do that for a couple of weeks, and then just after I've done those two things, I'll do this, and then all of a sudden, you've got those habits there. And then I think what Paul's just said is basically like, we're not doing that all day, every day, but you'll be like, right, okay, something slipped here. You go to your toolbox and find the habit or the thing that you need that gets you out of that, which we all do, because your focus changes, doesn't it? Like day to day, week to week. And if you focus, we were talking about it ages ago as well, to go with your previous life, Paul, the graphic equalizer. You know, this will go up, this will go down, and then you've got to go and get out your toolbox to bring this back up again. And as long as you're edging it all upwards like this, you're doing all right.
Yeah,
you're looking at me like I'm weird.
No, that totally
frozen again, Paul.
So like the thing that you brought up that's actually okay, so there's two things that are super important. One of them is like only having a few things. The other one is like lots of things working together, right? Like it's one of those things where like these like all the skills and guidelines don't exist, like they don't feel independent by the time you're done. It starts to feel like, oh, I pause 10 minutes and that's when I check in. And I check in these different ways, and these are the ways of checking in, you know, and then, you know, like that all fits together. And as you're learning, like you might end up with like 6 different things in there as you're learning. And then by the time you're done, you end up with like 3 total for like your whole life, right? People leave with like, oh, you know what? If I pause 10 minutes, like that solves out like everything for me, you know? And so there are like stages of it where there's stages of it being like really small, to like get that in, and then like adding things that help those things, and then you've got like a bunch of things and they kind of like fit together, and then you can like pare it down again. And then in the end it you know, I guess it's kind of like the what is it, chop wood, carry water, you know, as a beginner, chop wood, carry water, as a master, chop, you know, like it gets bigger and then it all comes back down again.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I'm conscious of time, Josh, because you've spent a lot of time. We've done about an hour and 10, I think, of actual recording. And I know you've got something else to get to. So,
so
absolutely fantastic to speak to you. Yeah, it's so lovely to connect with you and to talk with you. And it's been a really interesting conversation. I think it's followed on really well from Maggie, who we had on last week. You know, talking a lot around food and chronic cardio and kind of diet models and that sort of thing, which has been great. Pete, do you have anything you'd like to sort of say in conclusion?
I think I've said enough, so I'm going to shut up now. God, it's night time as well, and I've been talking a lot, so sorry. I'll go back to how I was last week when it was 10 o'clock and I was tired.
Paul, do you have a final thought at all?
Final thought, no. No. I mean, it's been great to speak to Josh, because I bought your book, Fat Loss Happens on Monday. A few years back, and I actually still keep referring to it. I don't have it in physical copy like James. I've got it on a Kindle, okay. There's just some real truths there. And one of the big struggles that I had as a new trainer was, how do I take these they seemed on the surface incredibly complex kind of issues that people bring to the table. You know, whether it was the stress eating, the emotional eating, particularly the emotional eating, where it's really complex because there's loads of different reasons why people do it. You never know when these things are going to derail people. And as a trainer, you want such a linear progression for your clients. You think in those terms. You think, oh, like when we do deadlifts and program for barbell work, you know, you just add 2.5 kilos or 5 pounds, and you just have this very linear progression. And then when it comes to food, you have it within you that you want to create that linear progression for your clients. And it just never is. I mean, the reality hits you very quickly, a few months into your job as a trainer, that's just not going to happen. And so reading your book, and obviously there's work with some other great trainers. I know you wrote books with Dan as well. And so it just gives you it gives you the confidence to know that you're on the right track when you read that stuff. The books you've written, thanks for finding the time to speak with us today, because it's been a fascinating conversation.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
That's what I was going to say. Thank you.
I just want to say we've got to give Chris Denning a shout out. We're recording on his birthday. Chris is in Canada. He listens every single week, and I know he's read Lean and Strong, and I was talking to Josh just before we came on and said and gave him your glowing review of the book and how much you're enjoying it. So,
thanks, Chris.
Big shout out to Chris Denning in Canada. And I just want to say, Josh, I just thank you for writing this book, because it's like I say, it's changing the way that I'm talking to my clients. You know, it's changing the way that I'm thinking about things, which is a massive, which is a huge thing. So just to change the way we think is brilliant. So thanks so much for coming on. It'd be great to get you on maybe in the future at some stage. We'll I've got 20 pages left to read, and then I'm going to finish.
We'll need to go back over those last 20 pages, clearly.
and then he'll give you his proper review of the book.
Right.
Finds out who done it.
Yeah.
It goes downhill in those last 20.
Yeah. Ended so poorly.
On the last 2 pages, Luke Skywalker comes back in, does he? Okay, right. Okay, cool. So I just want to say thank you so much to the usual co-host, Mr. Peter Lant. Thank you so much to Paul Bassett. Thank you so much to Josh Hillis for joining us today on episode 30. Please do like, subscribe, share, follow. If you can, leave a review for us wherever you listen to the podcast, either on Spotify or iTunes or Google or Apple or wherever you listen to the podcast. And please, share it around with your friends if you've enjoyed it. And we will see you next time for episode 31, which will be, we are tentatively calling it The Return of the Jedi with Dan John, because it will be his third visit. So we'll be back with him next week. So take care, guys. Thank you. And we'll catch up soon. Cheers.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.